The specific questions from Robert Tundegwa, the Supreme Court option in this particular regard. Why did IEBC not implement the reforms? Maybe that's a question that's being asked to Honorable Caleb. And to me, why we do not air the opinion of God, I think I'll answer that at a different time and place, or maybe towards the end of the show. Joseph in Nairobi also would like to know which the rules and regulations would operate retroactively. Let me start with you, Ndegwa, since there's a specific question to you.
Let me ask the listener on the Solomonic wisdom. If you had a child and one of them dies and there are two mothers claiming, and you know that the child is yours, would you say kill? That's one thing. So, and I'm comparing that to the exit of Raila Odinga in the sense that he claims to have won the elections. He won the elections with this system that was there. So if he actually won the system, what was the purpose of him pressing on the reforms on IBC if indeed he actually won the first election? May I say I prescribed no faith in terms of political faith, and because I do not want to be bundled into NASA and the Jubilee bandwagons. But as to the question of the Supreme Court opinion, yes, it's binding, but it's never law. Because the only person who has the mandate to make laws in this country is Parliament. And that's why I'm saying the 11th Parliament failed us, because they could have codified the opinion of the Supreme Court into a law. The law requires, for purposes of proper equilibrium, that in the event whereby you have a legislation that is giving a specific provision and you have a judge-made law through a case law, you cannot then resort into case law and abandon the legislated law. Because the legislated law is one that has been legislated through the people's supremacy and the sovereignty. So the question then, and I'm still putting it to Chebukati, is which wisdom did he think that he can exempt the legislated law and go to the judge-made law and lead the country into the elections with?
All right. Honorable Kostani, the question of the laws operating retroactively and why Jubilee basically is pushing for these laws now, the amendments.
Well, of course, the law will not operate retrogressively, so that is something that is known to everybody. But the reason why we are pushing for these laws is because we are going into an election. And Justice Maraga, in his parting shot at the ruling, he says, if the elections are held again and we find the same anomalies, we shall annul the election again. That was a very, very powerful statement. So we are saying we are going in for an election, and the Supreme Court gave a ruling. Let us look at where they found mistakes. I mean, one simple thing we are saying is if Form 34, and we want to thank the IEBC, because when they came for the public participation on the bills, they came and said, instead of saying manually, use the word physically. Physical delivery of Form 34As. Because we say manually, they say it's a bit vague.
Left to interpretation.
Yeah, it's left to interpretation. So say physical. And that we accommodated that. And even Chebukati came and said, let us have the chairman of IBC, because we had wanted to say any professional can be eligible to be chairman of IBC. But they came and explained and says, no, we need somebody with a legal background. And we accepted that. We accepted that. All the views that were given, and those that we saw, we married them with what we had, and we passed the laws yesterday. So I think we are doing this for the good of Kenya. We are doing this so that in an election, 2022, 2032, and the years to go by, this law will be appreciated by Kenyans, and they say the 12th Parliament saved us. And as Parliament also, we are saying, we want our legal minds in Parliament and those outside to relook at the Constitution again. I always say I am proud to have voted no. Because we saw this Constitution before, and we ganged up and we said, this is not good for the country. Because we had seen there was a problem. Okay. But now we have to live with it.
The problem is
but
not
we want now our legal minds to look at it and have correction, so that we don't have
this back and forth
thing coming on and on.
All right, very briefly.
Yeah, the problem is not with the document. The problem is the person implementing the document. And may I say that subsequent to the delivery of the judgment by the Supreme Court, Chebukati is on record saying that they have deciphered it and reduced it into operational manuals. And then what I think Parliament has done in its wisdom, they have refused to stop at where the 11th Parliament stopped. And there is a decision of the Supreme Court to stop at that. For them, they have gone and seen and tried to decipher what is this that the court dealt with that we need to seal. My parting shot is that now that in his own wisdom, Chebukati thought that he could reduce it into a manual. What is wrong if the same manuals are codified into a law?
Okay.
A couple of things. First, someone talked with regard to Uhuru Kenyatta not listening to the laws or respecting the laws. I think what I'd like to say, it's an institutional issue. You see, the way the Constitution is, if it's Parliament, if it's the judiciary, if it's the executive, we are all dealing with delegated power, that the people of Kenya are the ones who have given us these powers, and we should be able to listen to the various arms. No particular arm is supposed to be superior on the other. You know, if the Supreme Court, for example, decided against Uhuru Kenyatta, it is nothing personal. It is just that it's one branch of government doing another branch of government's job. So it's supposed to be a check and a balance system in a manner that if at all we listen to each other in terms of institutions, the country will then be moving forward. But the second thing that I'd like to say is with regard to the laws that Parliament was making. I think, one, some of the provisions were good. The problem was the timing and the spirit. You see, the manner in which they were making the laws, people thought that they were making laws that were responding to the election of October 26th. But now that actually they're going to be retroactive, I think there's a chance to even make them better, polish them and refine them. One issue that I have, for example, is with this particular one on how do you deal with a withdrawal or a vacation of a candidature.
Which should have come for public participation.
Which now, you know, because if you look at it, if it is possible, for example, then to vacate a few days to a presidential election, then you can be sure that several other things like that can happen. What then happens? We end up in a spiral. I think Parliament should then put a caveat, or in terms of, you know, an exception in terms of how many withdrawals or how many postponements can you have subsequent to nullification of an election. Because otherwise then we're on a roll. But
we're on a roll.
There's something interesting he has introduced.
Before we go to that, because I know that might just take us off where I want us to go. And Robert, why do we not have God's view? Well, my submission to that would be, if I refer to the good book, it says that we are all created in the image of God. Therefore, I would imagine that these are our leaders. The Bible also tells us that leadership comes neither from the west or east, but comes from God. So when we invite the leaders, I would like to think that those are the leaders that we have put in place. But moving on, at the heart of this political duel is the IEBC, that besides being called on by the candidates to run a credible process, the Chebukati-led body has also been blamed for not being committal to what NASA called the irreducible minimums. Here is NASA leader Raila Odinga and co-principal Musalia Mudavadi articulating the flaws by IEBC.
IEBC has stonewalled meaningful deliberations on the necessary reforms to ensure that the elections of 26th of October are free and fair. It has wasted valuable time engaging in public relations exercises intended to create the illusion of motion without any movement. You have come to the conclusion that there is no intention on the part of the IEBC to undertake any changes to its operations and personnel.
The Commission CEO, who was the coup plotter in chief, and his litany of senior secretariat staff continue to dominate the operations of the Commission and stifle any attempt to initiate reforms at the Commission.
All right, Honorable Kostani, I'll start with you. Your closing comments in regards to that and whether we are here because of IEBC specifically.
Well, we are here because of many reasons. And I cannot squarely blame it on IEBC, but of course they have made a few mistakes here and there. But I will not blame IEBC wholly because I said in my earlier on that NASA went to court. We are in this position because of a court ruling by the Supreme Court, which they respected and we respected. And the same court has actually ruled that none of the IEBC officials have been found capable of any offense. But this NASA seemed to be having a wage against Chiloba. And even the other day, we saw Rengo. I think he went out of his mind and said, "Ata Chebukati, IEBC water waende," which is something that is not possible. And I think the whole game that NASA is playing, and this is my personal opinion, is Raila knows he's lost this election. He's going to lose whether we're going to have an election on 26th, which I know we're going to have. He's going to lose it. Raila is preparing himself to run again in 2022. So I want to tell Musalia, Kalonzo, and Tangula, smell the coffee. Kalonzo, you will remain a running mate. Musalia, you will remain wherever you are, a principal, and so will Weta. So they should smell the cover. Raila is ahead of these guys. They are just trooping to his, he did this press conference. I'm told he's going to the UK and wherever. Let him enjoy his trip. But as leaders, we need to know. We as Jubilee, we are clear in our mind. It does not matter who prints the ballot papers. It does not matter who is in charge of IBC. It does not matter who is the CEO. We want the votes ya mwananchi to be counted.
Thank you, sir.
And there's just something that we forgot there. Somebody asked a question and said the president has failed in his duty. I want to say that we have a very good president. We have a president who is focused. We have a president who thinks, puts this country first. We have a president who is actively involved in trying to get Kenyans to come together. He's not a tribalist. He's leading because of the will of the sovereign will of the people, as stated in chapter 1. He got the majority votes. And let us allow President Uhuru Kenyatta to exercise his mandate. He has his 5 years. After that, we have the deputy president running. So we as Jubilee, we are factoring in our...
Thank you, sir. Let me come to you, Agostino, your closing comments.
I'd like to say 3 things. The first one is, I think I'd like to request Honorable Kosita to keep to Jubilee issues and leave NASA issues alone. Whether Raila is running in 2022...
They are national.
Whether Raila is running in 2022, that's a NASA affair, but which has not made clear.
Public yet.
But I think one of the things that we're saying is that, one, IBC has brought us to the particular issue of withdrawal or absconding the election because of what provision they used in terms of enacting this particular, conducting this particular election. It behoves them now to proceed up to the end in terms of what they had proceeded to do, because then they would have looked at what other interpretations are available for them to conduct the election of October 26th. But the second thing I'd like to say is that it is important to have reforms at IEBC. Some of the things that, the Supreme Court found that the election was not done in accordance with the law. Some of the mistakes of commission, in terms of what laws ought to have, what format the forms should have taken, what transmission should have happened. The chair himself declared results without results from all the polling centers, which in the odd admission, maybe things that could have been cured. Maybe the results existed, but how do you declare results without having all the forms? So some of those mistakes were deliberate mistakes of commission, which could have been avoided. And I really think that should we move into the next election, they should be conducted in accordance with the law. But lastly, I think I'd like to tell Kenyans that, one, NASA is only interested in minimum reforms for this particular election. There's nothing extra legal about it. And I really think that the best thing that could happen to Kenya is if at all we could agree to conduct an election 60 days after October 26th, once we've also exercised minimum election reforms in a manner that makes NASA happy, makes Jubilee happy, but in a scenario that leaves Kenya wholly intact as a country. Because really, we do not want to have post-election fights. This is one country, and we must move forward in terms of making it solid as we move on as one people.
Thank you very much. Dego, your closing comments.
Thank you very much, and for the panelists. My thinking is that we are because of the incompetence of the chair of the commission. The chair of the commission is the architect of all this quagmire where we find ourselves in, and he owes Kenyans an apology and an explanation as to why he is not able to read and interpret the law, noting that he is a person of the status of a judge of the High Court. If this Kenya bans, this Kenya will ban because of his negligence and misconduct and his inability to comprehend and do the things as contemplated in law. The other thing that finds us where we are is because of failure of the institutions, both political institutions and this other constitutional institution. The political institution is full of suspicion among themselves. Jubilee suspects NASA, NASA suspects Jubilee, such that any statement that is made or any pronouncement that is made, it's always taken with a pinch of salt. We must be able to cultivate confidence in our political institutions. We must be able to cultivate confidence in our institutions, and our institutions must have the responsibility of doing that which is bestowed upon them by the members of this country. Finally, it is toxic for Parliament, and I thought about it when he mentioned it, just to tag the question of a withdrawal of the president in an act of Parliament. Anything dealing with the death of the president, what happens during the elections, withdrawal should be constitutionally entrenched, other than leaving it loose in just an act of Parliament. It's food for thought, whether or not we want that provisions in an act of Parliament or we want to anchor it in our Constitution.
Yes. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That's Caleb Kostani, Ndegwa Njiro, Agostino